Hello and welcome to the Vox News. I am Adetokunbo Akintayo. Libya's National Transitional Council said on Thursday Muammar Gaddafi's fugitive son, Saif al-Islam, wants an aircraft to take him out of Libya's southern desert so he can turn himself in to the Hague War Crimes Court. 39-year-old Saif al-Islam went on the run at about the time his father met a grisly death a week ago. Saif and ex-intelligence chief Abdullah el-Sanusi have indicated their readiness to surrender to justice. Both men are the subject of arrest warrants from the International Criminal Court (ICC). Conflicting reports of Saif al-Islam's whereabouts have circulated since they vanished from the Gaddafi stronghold of Bani Walid in the north of the country, with some accounts putting him and Sanusi in Niger. We're still with Libya. The country's interim deputy defense minister said on Wednesday it would depend on military units allied to Libya's new rulers to protect its oil fields and borders until a new army is formed. Fawzi Al-Bukitev also said fighters will be welcome to join Libya's new army once it is formed.
Building our army, at the same time, the revolutionaries will be guarding the borders, the installations of the oil, of the water, and until we are in a place to have the army in control. Whoever is officer will be automatically enrolled to the army, and who is not in the army, who is not officer, will constitute the revolutionaries. So it's not just clear how to separate the two here in the West. But otherwise, most of the country is clear because of the way that they started earlier. They have completed their formation during the way of the war.
Several people were feared killed in an attack on a vehicle in northeastern Kenya on Thursday. Police spokesman Eric Kirate said the district police commander and his security team were proceeding to the scene. No information on casualties and other circumstances has yet been confirmed. But residents in the town of Mandera said they had heard reports that 4 people had been killed in an attack on a vehicle transporting material for school exams. Mandera is in Kenya's sparsely populated far northeast, close to the porous borders with Ethiopia and Somalia. Al-Shabaab rebels are suspected of being behind the attack. Somalia's Prime Minister says Kenya has every right to pursue Al-Shabaab rebels in Somalia, but Somali government troops must be in charge of operations against the Islamist rebels. Kenya deployed troops inside an anarchic Horn of Africa nation 12 days ago in an offensive against Al-Shabaab fighters it blames for a series of kidnappings on its soil and frequent cross-border incursions. Somalia's president cast doubt on his government support for the incursion on Monday. On Wednesday, Mogadishu reiterated there was no deal with Kenya to send in its troops, but said the Prime Minister would now liaise with Nairobi. The Somali government has so far stopped short of asking Kenyan troops to leave, and the Prime Minister's comments show the authorities appear to accept the incursion. The trial of 2 Kenyans accused of involvement in the death of a British tourist and the abduction of his wife at a camp resort in northern Kenya's Lamu archipelago was postponed on Wednesday to November by a Kenyan court. The prosecution asked the magistrate for an adjournment to enable the police to receive vital exhibits from forensic experts. The 2, Ali Babitu Kololo and Isa Sheikh Said, are facing charges of robbery with violence and kidnapping with the intention to murder. They have both denied the charges. Somali pirates in a lawless Horn of Africa nation has said she is being held in the country. The magistrate granted a request for an adjournment and set a mention of the case November 9th, while full hearing will commence on the 29th of the same month. Families of 25 Egyptians expected to be released in a prisoner swap with Israel began gathering early on Thursday morning at the border crossing to wait for their relatives. On Wednesday, Israel's security cabinet approved the freeing of the prisoners to secure the release of an Israeli-American, Ilan Grappel, who has been held by Cairo on suspicion of espionage. Many of the Egyptians being released are Bedouins from Sinai accused by Israel of engaging in smuggling and crossing the border illegally. At the time of Grappel's arrest, Egypt accused him of being a spy seeking to recruit agents and monitor events after the popular revolt in February. Israel has denied that Grappel was involved in espionage. European leaders have reached a three-pronged agreement described as vital to solve the region's huge debt crisis. They said banks holding Greek debt accepted a 50% loss, the Eurozone bailout fund will be boosted, and banks will have to raise more capital. Shares on European markets rose sharply on news of the deal. The agreement is aimed at preventing the crisis spreading to larger Eurozone economies like Italy, but the leaders said work still needed to be done. After marathon talks in Brussels, they agreed a mechanism to boost the Eurozone's main bailout fund to about €1 trillion. Banks must also raise more capital to protect them against losses resulting from any future government defaults. Commonwealth foreign ministers gathered for a second day in Perth, Australia on Thursday as more leaders arrived for the 2011 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting CHOGM set to start on Friday. A proposal to appoint the Commonwealth Human Rights Commissioner to steer a more proactive rights agenda looks set to test the summit this week as the 54 member nations try to make a more lasting impact on world affairs. Sri Lanka, at war with Tamil Tiger rebels for a quarter of a century, rejects outside interference in its human rights affairs, an issue that could divide the summit. The UN and human rights groups have called for an independent inquiry into allegations of war crimes during the closing stages of the war, which ended in 2009. At a business conference on the sidelines of the foreign ministers' meeting, Sri Lanka President Mahinda Rajapaksa defended his country's human rights record.
An end to terrorist violence was absolutely essential to move the country forward along the path of economic and social development.
Ultimate measure of this institution's value going forward will remain the commitment asked of all member governments, to the elevation of human dignity and liberty for all their citizens. In the next few days, it's my strong hope that the Commonwealth shall reaffirm and reinvigorate this great purpose.
I feel that the Commonwealth may not be relevant after a few years. If it has it must become proactive, and there is a need to vitalize the Commonwealth countries. I mean, that regime today has really not able to stop the human rights violations in several countries which are members of the Commonwealth.
Thousands of residents are rushing to leave the Thai capital, Bangkok, which is braced for potentially severe flooding over the weekend. The city's bus and train stations and main roads are jammed by crowds of people attempting to flee. People in several northern districts of the capital, some of which are now 90% submerged by rising water, have been told they should evacuate immediately. More than 360 people have died in Thailand's worst flooding in decades. The crisis is an early test for Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, who took office in August and has previously been criticized for failing to take the flood threat seriously enough. The number of people known to have been killed in Sunday's earthquake in Turkey's southeast has risen to 523. Officials say 1,650 people were injured in the 7.2 magnitude quake, which had its epicenter in Van province. 185 people have been rescued alive. Rain and snow are hindering the rescue effort and worsening conditions for the thousands of people made homeless. Tents and other aid supplies are being delivered after some initial criticism that the response was too slow. Hundreds of people are still missing under collapsed buildings. Rescuers in some places are continuing to search for those buried in the rubble, but at other sites they have stopped work and attention is turning to the needs of the survivors. Former Argentine naval officer Alfredo Aristides has been jailed for life for crimes against humanity during military rule in 1976 to 83. Aristides, known as the Blonde Angel of Death, was found guilty of torture, murder, and forced disappearance. Among his victims were 2 French nuns and the founders of the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo human rights group. 11 other former military and police officers were also given life sentences for crimes against humanity. 4 others were jailed for between 18 and 25 years. All worked at a naval mechanical school in Buenos Aires known as ESMA, which was the biggest secret torture and killing center set up by the military during what became known as the Dirty War. Of the 5,000 or so prisoners taken to ESMA, 90% did not come out alive. And finally, Queen Elizabeth visited an Aboriginal school in Perth on Thursday as part of a visit to Western Australia. Accompanied by the Premier of the state of Western Australia, Colin Barnett, the Queen watched the Wanduba dance troupe perform to didgeridoo music at the Clontarf Aboriginal College. Inside the classroom, she watched her home economics class in action. One 16-year-old student, Zenith Cox, made a special dish, a bubbling pot of kangaroo stew. He even presented the Queen with a small container of raw stew to take away. Some girls took the opportunity to practice their curtsies as the Queen walked by. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip are in Australia for a 10-day visit. They will open the biennial meeting of leaders of 54 Commonwealth nations in the Western Australian capital of Perth on Friday. Well, doing it the kangaroo way. That's it on the Vox News. You can visit us online, voxafrica.co.uk, or by Twitter and Facebook. Goodbye for now.